Good morning, everybody. This is Jeb Blount, and this is Sales Onboarding, how to accelerate new salespeople to full productivity fast. Just as a side note, the full slide deck is going to be in the attachments and link tab, so you can grab that. There's also a attachment that will give you a free chapter of my leadership book, People Follow You. My name is Jeb Blount. I'm the founder and CEO of Sales Gravy, and I'm also a managing partner and founder of Channel EQ. I'm a sales acceleration specialist, and you can learn more about my companies and myself at salesgravy.com, channeleq.co, and also my own blog, jebblount.com. I'm the author of 7 books, including my bestsellers, People by You, People Follow You, The Real Secret to What Matters Most in Leadership, and my brand new bestseller, Fanatical Prospecting. Let's jump right into the content. So you just hired a brand new salesperson. Now what? Well, the thing to think about is you think you hired a great salesperson, but actually did you? And my suggestion is that you just hired a salesperson with the potential to be great. Your new salesperson's sales productivity is going to be dependent on the quality and the effectiveness of your sales onboarding program. And this is where most new hire sales programs or new hires fail. And we lose a lot of salespeople in the very beginning of a program because we don't have an effective sales onboarding program. And they fail for a number of reasons. One is, and I see this happen a lot with my clients, intention without action. So we have the intent to onboard someone. We have maybe a process that we've kind of scoped out, but we don't actually ever do anything about it. And one of the worst problems with intention without action is that there's the intention to actually build an onboarding program. In fact, we'll have clients come and purchase our software, our onboarding automation software, and their training department actually never gets around to developing the program, and then a year later they hire us to come in and do it for them. So this happens to companies everywhere because you've got so many things going on. The other problem, and one reason why sales onboarding programs fail, is that you're dumping information on the new hire, just giving them all kinds of information all at one time. And because of this, there's a poor sequencing of the training material. An example of this is I have an inside sales client that when we first started working with them, their new hires would spend 3 weeks in the classroom learning all the systems and the processes and the protocols and the scripts and all that stuff. And then they would put them on the sales floor. And the managers all complained that they were basically having to retrain all these new hires. And the problem is that they were taking 3 weeks of dumping all this information on the new hire. The new hires were getting no hands-on experience, and the training was sequenced in a way that even though, for example, a person may have learned something, they didn't experience it to maybe 3 or 4 months later, and by then it was gone. And what we were able to do is help them change the way that they deliver the training. We were getting people on the floor instead of in 3 weeks with all this information. We were getting on the floor in a week. And we were sequencing the training in a way that made the most sense. The other problem that happens a lot is we assign our best salespeople to train our new hires. And even though they're our best salespeople, a lot of them are savants that it's intuitive for them, and they simply don't know how to teach another person how to sell. And it gets worse because they don't have any guidelines or anything. So I'll sometimes go into an account or go into one of my clients, and I'll see their best salesperson training, and basically what they're doing is they're doing the work, and there's someone watching them. And you can learn a little bit from that, but you really learn from hands-on doing things. There's also an inconsistent delivery system. Sometimes it's automated, sometimes it's through human beings, sometimes it's through manuals. I had a client recently where we went in to take a look at their onboarding program, and they had and I'm not kidding you, it was a 3-ring binder, and it was at least 6 inches thick, and that was how they were delivering that to 22-year-old millennials who looked at that manual and never got broke into it, and they would just try to figure it out on their own hand, with their hands in on the computers. You also have a disengaged leadership team, and we see this often with clients that they've got like a big span of control. The leaders are really driven to close deals now. And so they bring a new hire in, and the leader basically just waits for the new hire to prove themselves before they spend any time with them. And of course, there's flavor of the day, and that's when your leadership team keeps changing what you're doing and what you're training, and it changes and changes and changes and changes. And pretty soon, nobody knows what to do. The communication and the message gets a little bit garbled, and people don't exactly know what to do. Now, if you're on this webinar and you're looking at it for how do I build a case for building a sales onboarding program, here's some things to take a look at. Now, let's talk about what the cost of a sales onboarding program is to develop. So if you're doing it on your own, you're looking at probably several hundred hours of work to really get this right. And I'm going to walk you through some of the steps that you would need to go through from a checklist standpoint to understand. But these things are expensive. So you figure if you're going to hire a consulting firm to help you with this, somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 to build it. And if you're going to do it on your own, you're looking at, I would say, an investment of 200 to 300 hours of work on developing the content, building out the content, creating your delivery systems, educating everybody. So there's a lot of expense in building the onboarding programs. So because of that, I think it's important that you're able to demonstrate what the ROI is for building that. So it's a really simple formula. You can take a look at what are the lost sales while a position is open. So what's happening when the position's open, it's costing you to bring someone new in. If you look at the turnover with your new hires, you can figure out what your turnover percentage is in, say, the first 6 months or a year and figure out how many lost sales are happening because you're flipping those positions more often. A great onboarding program will increase retention, which will reduce the lost sales while positions open. What's the cost of hiring the person? From entry level, it's somewhere around $3,500 is your cost to hire to, more senior level salespeople. You're looking at anywhere from, $10,000 to $25,000 to recruit and hire that person. What's the cost of the salary and the benefits while they're ramping up? So while they're not productive, while they're onboarding, how much are you spending there? What's the training cost? So what's the cost of teaching them in terms of both soft and real cost? What are the lost sales while the person's in place but they're ramping up? You can subtract out the actual sales that new hires are producing because they're going to sell something. You figure up your total ramp-up cost, and then you scale that across your organization. And you'll usually figure out that the investment in an onboarding program is worth it. The thing about onboarding, and this is really the power of onboarding, is that sales onboarding, sales training. Now, this is not like HR onboarding where you're talking about I-9s and things like this. Sales onboarding is around bridging the person to the skills and the proficiency and the competencies for the role that your company has, the vertical that you're in, the customer base, the products, solutions, and services. Sales onboarding connects those two things together. And when we think about this process of connecting the things together, there are 5 core steps to developing effective sales onboarding programs. The first step is determining the optimal ramp-up period and what those milestones would be along that ramp-up period. An example of this, and I'll show you a graph in just a moment, but I started working with a company a few years ago. When we met them, it was taking 18 months to ramp up a new salesperson all the way to getting an ROI on all of the investment they had made during that 18 months, so a long ramp-up period. And we went through the process and figured out that the optimal ramp-up period for that particular job and that particular company was about 90 days. So it was taking 18 months to ramp up someone we should be able to ramp up in 90 days. So what we did was we figured out what that was, and we backed into that, and we created milestones along the way. And I'll show you a process for doing that in just a second. The next thing is you need to determine what the rep needs to know and when they need to know it. So one of the major problems, we talked about this earlier, is that you've got this fire hose of information that you're cramming down their throat, but they don't need to know everything at once. And this is the fallacy in new hire training, is that, well, if they don't know this and they run into it, what are they going to do about it? Well, I just look at the things that they need to know in terms of probability. What's the probability that they need to know this in week 1? What's the probability in week 2? Probability in week 3, week 4, week 5? So if the probability is that an issue is going to come up with a customer or in a sales situation, that say it's a 20% chance it's going to come up in the first 3 weeks, I'm not going to teach it to them. Because if they run into it, they'll have someone that they can go ask, and they'll learn that way, and we'll put it in the training down the road. What happens is then we're able to pull the training out, and we're able to sequence it and chunk it up in a way that makes the most sense. And then with the reps getting the information that they need to know, they're applying it in real life situations, so it's sticking, and that allows us to ramp up much faster and get an ROI faster. The next step is you got to develop your onboarding curriculum. The curriculum is critical here. So, and curriculum this is where your cost comes in. What's it going to look like? How are you going to deliver the information? What are the online programs going to look like? What are the offline programs going to look like? What are your classroom programs going to look like? And even when we've got people shadowing, creating observation guides that allow you to sort of script out what that new hire is asking when they're shadowing a peer mentor or one of your best people on the floor. And then next, determine training delivery mechanism. And what that means is, how are you going to deliver the training? So are you going to do it computer-based? Are you going to do it in classroom? Are you going to do it on the job? You're going to do it as, across all of those together, which I would suggest. So what's the process? And we'll talk a little bit about that in just a moment. Now, the thing is that there's 5 key elements as we go through a program that we need to think about. And element number 1 is that you've got to create a learning path that ramps up new sales hires fast. Now, if you're an executive, or you are passing this on to an executive, or you're talking to an executive, here's where the money is. The money is, how long is it taking us to ramp people up to a return on sales headcount now, and how can we shift that so that we can reduce that ramp-up time? We typically use a Six Sigma type process to help a company figure out what reps need to know, how fast they can ramp up, and we'll put groups of leaders in states so that we force them to fit ramp up into a shorter period of time. Usually we stretch out a little bit longer, but because we put them in that situation, it forces them to take out all the superfluous information that is not contributing to a sales rep getting up to speed faster. The second thing that we have to do is we have to create educational design that enables learning. So for example, the company that I walked in at a 6-inch wide binder. They were a tall binder that they were giving their reps to learn from, and these are like 22-year-old millennials. That is not educational design that enables learning. So we need to think about who we're teaching, how we're teaching them, and what's going to best enable their learning. We need an effective and efficient training delivery system. So it has to do 2 things. It has to make training easy, make it fast, and make it effective. And we also need a management engagement and coaching and feedback. So what that means is that no matter what you do, right, all of the stuff doesn't matter unless management is engaged. The sales leaders, the supervisors, the people on the floor, the people who are out in the field with your folks, they have to be totally engaged. They have to be owning the new hire, and they have to give regular coaching and feedback. And I'll flip forward and show you where that matters. And then you've got to create testing and metrics around the milestones that lead you into return on sales headcount. And you've got to create accountability. And I believe in rigid accountability with sales onboarding programs, because if you don't have that level of accountability, the new hire gets lost and the managers begin to abdicate their responsibility. Now, we talked about timeline. So this is just a sample timeline. Don't get hung up in the numbers. So this is how you might back into this. You figure out, when do I get return on sales headcount? So we call it ROSHI, but what's your return on sales headcount? And if you figure it's going to be 180 days, then if you back into that, you can say, okay, at 90 days, I need sustained quota. So I need them to be hitting quota on a regular basis. And then by 60 days, I need consistent performance. So they're performing at a consistent level. By 45 days, they sold 3 sales. By 30 days, they sold their first sale. By 15 days, they have a basic confidence, and at 0, they start. So you could take a look at your sales force right now, figure out when do you get a return on your sales headcount investment? When do you want to get the return on your sales headcount investment? And then you back into this. And then once you have this timeline, that's when you can go back to, okay, what do they need to know, and when do they need to know it? And you begin building your program. And I love going through this process because it's a really iterative process that allows us to help create some awareness around where the deficiencies are in our current program. Now, when you start thinking about the process, and we'll go back here real quickly and take a look at this, of how long does it take to ramp that person up? So in this case, it was 180 days. You also want to take a look at your particular sales environment. So there's 2 things that drive an increase in the time that it takes to ramp someone up, and that is complexity of the sale itself and the length of the sales cycle. So from a sales cycle length, you have purely transactional. These are typically, one-call closes. So if you have a really transactional environment, especially if it's an inside sales team and a lot of the work is coming inbound, then your sales cycle and your ramp-up period ought to be really, really quick. I mean, you ought to be able to get people on the floor selling in about 10 days. But as the sales cycle increases and the complexity of what you're doing increases, then you're going to have some longer ramp up. If you have SDRs or BDRs who are doing nothing but prospecting, again, the ramp up period for that ought to be really, really short. If you've got account executives that are doing enterprise level software solutions, then your ramp up period is going to be longer. So what I use is this type of matrix to help understand how long it's going to be. Now, one of the things that's interesting when we sit down with clients and we use this particular matrix is how few clients are really aware of their particular situation. So when we ask them, where do you fit in here? In most cases, leaders think that their cycle is longer than it really is, and their complexity is higher than it really is, and therefore the ramp up that they're expecting is skewed longer, which is costing them a lot of money in lost sales because they're not focusing on the fact that they can get people ramped up faster. The other thing is that there's not a lot of faith that you can ramp up people faster, and what we prove over and over again when we get into onboarding consulting processes and working with companies, one-to-one, is that it's surprising to them how fast people can assimilate information if we give it to them in the right way. And this means that we have to design a learning path that is around three basic things with your curriculum. You need to chunk it up into really small pieces. So, for example, with videos, we rarely have a video that's longer than 2.5 minutes for self-directed online learning. We have to give them the information in pieces that are easy to consume and easy to understand, and then we have to layer that information back on top of it. So we don't give them a piece of information once and never come back to it again. We sequence the information in a way that makes the most sense for when they need to know the information, and then we chunk it up into small pieces, and then we keep teaching the most important information over and over and over again so it becomes repetitive. And when we do this, people, they consume the information so much faster. It gets assessed so much easier when they're in situations. And because we typically want to design onboarding programs that have people doing a combination of learning and hands-on. For example, especially with inside sales, we may have them doing some self-directed modules. In the morning, we might have them shadowing a peer mentor in the mid-morning, and then we might have them hands-on, taking easy calls or working on easy things, practicing what they learned in the morning that afternoon. Then we layer it back on the next morning, and we teach the same information again, but we add more on. And when we think about curriculum design along that path, so chunked, layered, and sequenced, we also think about how we might deliver that. So there are basically four ways that you can mix your training up, and we recommend mashing your training up across these four different paradigms. First, it's self-directed online video-based modules and tutorials. Some of the tutorials can be written, but they're getting information, so they're basically getting sort of a broadcast of information. They then take that information and with guided on-the-job learning processes with their managers, and we even give them learning guides. They spend time with peer mentors. Now, peer mentors are different than giving someone to your best salesperson. What a peer mentor is someone who has been taught how to train one-to-one, who understands what their job and their role is, and the new hires that are learning, the people in the onboarding program, have on-the-job learning guides that allow both the peer mentor and them to stay structured in a particular item. So we typically will run them through a self-directed online learning module, and they go get hands-on with a peer mentor. Then there's virtual classroom training programs, and these are, when we talk about virtual classroom, these are training programs that are then facilitated by certified instructors for your onboarding program, and they're live and they're interactive, but they don't actually have to take someone out of a training program. A person can do it at a terminal, they can do it remotely, and these are very short chunks, but they're interactive. And then the most effective type of learning is interactive and experiential classroom training programs designed around very specific learning objectives and taught by certified trainers. And when you weave all this together and mash it all up, you get really powerful onboarding programs that move people and get them up to speed fast. Now, here's the warning and here's the caveat. In the absence of systematic coaching, however, the training material will not be retained. The numbers, the data tells us that there's about an 87% loss of the information, the skills that you gained in training in the absence of coaching. So coaching anchors training, and for this reason, you have to have ownership around the entire onboarding program. And when I talk about rigid accountability, this is why. If the leaders are not involved, if the sales managers and the supervisors and anybody that's on the floor, especially inside sales, but in outside sales, if your sales managers aren't with your new hires, training and coaching them and anchoring the onboarding training, it will not stick. And so we have to think about accountability across all of the people that are involved in a new hire program, the trainer, the manager, and the new hire. Well, the trainer owns the process. So if you have a trainer working with you, they set the new hire up, they facilitate the training, they manage the curriculum, and they deliver ongoing communication to all the stakeholders. Back when I was a vice president of sales, I'd 6 trainers that were working for me, and every Friday I sat down with all my trainers and they would walk me through all the new hires, where they were working, where they were in the program, where we were having problems, what our concerns were, and they would let me know my leaders, my managers, my sales managers who were abdicating their responsibility, and we could jump on that so we didn't lose the new hire in the process of onboarding them. Now, the manager owns the new hire. It is their responsibility to make sure that new hire gets what they need and that they stick and that they're paying attention to them. So their job is to remove roadblocks, to be with them, providing regular coaching and feedback. And in fact, in our automated programs, we force the two together in a weekly meeting where they're monitoring progress. And then, of course, the new hire has responsibility too here. They have to own the learning. They have to actively participate. They have to hit their milestones. They have to communicate learning gaps. And this is important that the trainer helps them understand. If you don't understand something, you have to raise your hand because we won't know it through osmosis. And then they have to show a real commitment to the program. And if they're not committed to the program, then it tells you maybe you have a bad hire. And if you have a bad hire, it's a whole lot easier to move them out in the first part of the program than to wait 6 months or a year or 18 months to figure out that you hired the wrong person. So with that said, because it's so important that the leaders are involved, because if they're not involved and they're not coaching and they're not providing feedback, then what happens is the onboarding program fails. So you have to understand first that your sales leaders feel tremendous pressure to produce right now. So their leadership, their vice presidents, all the people above them, your company's senior executives are expecting sales today. And so when you get a lot of pressure to get sales today, then what happens is you'll take new hires who are not producing right now and you push them to the side and they get left behind. So when you're building an onboarding program, you have to think about your leaders. And you have to understand that if your leaders aren't coaching and giving feedback, the program's going to fail. So you want to avoid overburdening them. And so although it's critical to have a well thought out, structured, systematic new hire onboarding and training program, it's more important to have an onboarding program that can be easily executed at the field level. So you have to have systems and processes that manage it. And one of the reasons that we suggest moving into an automated system that manages the process is because what it does is it does the work, it remembers the things that managers need to do. A long time ago when I was a sales manager, is back in the 90s before you had the cloud-based computer systems we had today, I had a binder. So I got a new hire and I had to go through the binder and manage all the way through the binder. And it's a sales manager getting pressure to produce today, it was easy to get away from the working with them, and I would start making up my own system. So what you have to do is you've got to have a process that makes it easy for the managers and then manages milestones. The key here is you're getting new salespeople producing revenue fast, and you want to deliver a rapid return on the sales hiring investment. And at the minimum, you want to deliver a consistent training message across the entire enterprise. So in automating your system, it allows you to do that. So to do that, you want to have regular knowledge assessments. I want to have a process that automates and provides reporting across the entire system so that we know what people know. We want to measure our progress relentlessly, and you need rigid accountability. So rigid accountability means that if there are milestones, we know that people aren't hitting their milestones, they're not doing their job, they're not owning the new hire, they're not owning the training, they're not owning their learning. If they're not owning those things, I need to know about it quickly, and I need to get people right back on track again. It's tough in a world where we have so many different plays that we can, that are different moves that we can make. People don't really want to be tied down to things that are so rigid. But in an onboarding program, the failure to have rigid accountability and to measure progress will sink your onboarding program, and it will do it very, very fast. So important that we have these things in place. So what happens when you begin to automate your onboarding is that you create these systems and these cloud-based systems that allow you to work offline, work online, send people anywhere you want to. A great automated system actually sits on top of your existing LMS. It can work with outside vendors. It can do everything, but it basically directs the process. So the new hire is getting information. It makes it really easy for them. Nobody has to tell them what to do. It's easy for everybody to manage because the system does the work for you. You deliver consistent outcomes. It eliminates the administrative burden because there's no paper reporting, and you get cascaded reporting on exactly what the new hire is doing across the entire enterprise. It also, and what my clients find when they automate onboarding, is it saves them a lot of money because they make calls on bad hires really fast because they can see if someone's not committed to their learning and they're not going to learn. It's rarely that the person isn't competent because companies are pretty good at hiring competent people. It's usually that the person is not all the way there. They don't have the drive, they don't want to play, they don't want to do what they have to do, and those folks are long-term never going to work out for you in a sales environment. And because you're getting better data, you're getting all this information in, it helps you build continuous improvement, and ultimately you get a faster ramp up. So here's a short commercial for us. We have a program called Sales University and Revenue Accelerator. And Revenue Accelerator is an amazing program that automates new hire training. It's cloud-based, both desktop and through mobile apps. It's scalable, it's adaptable, and it's easy, and it removes the administrative burden from handling an onboarding program. The cool thing about Revenue Accelerator and Sales University, it integrates into all training programs. So we can either send scoring packages to your current LMS, but it allows us to create a linear path in order to get your new hires onboarded faster. And my phone number is there, 844-447-3737. It's 844-447-3737. If you're interested in learning more information, you can give us a call, or you can come to our websites. We do this both on the indirect channel, which is Channel EQ. We work with partners and partner salespeople, and then direct channels where you own your own sales organization. And finally, in the attachment is a free chapter of my best-selling book, People Follow You, The Real Secret What Matters Most in Leadership. You can buy it on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And if you're in leadership, I recommend the book. If you don't like it, you can track me down. My email is in the deck that you'll download, and I'll give you a refund. But I think it's a program that you'll really like and you'll really enjoy. With that said, I think we've made it in the 30 minutes. I love a shorter webinar than a faster webinar. My email address is jeb@salesgravy.com. That's JEB@salesgravy.com. So if you have any questions following this, or you want to connect with me via email. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter @salesgravy. I'm on Instagram @salesgravy. I'm on Facebook. You can find me, my Facebook page is /People by You, and then my personal Facebook, you're welcome to connect with me there, is /salesgravy. Thank you for joining us for our webinar this morning, and I'll be back with another webinar in I think next month. We're doing a webinar on prospecting skills, outbound prospecting skills for SDRs and BDRs. So have a fantastic day. Thank you for joining us.